Alright, so this latest chapter of My Hero Academia definitely provided us with a number of answers to some of our more current questions, as it very much served to fill us in on what we have missed in the past month since Deku's departure. A stark contrast to what was a rather action-oriented previous chapter, one where Deku and Muscular would face off against one another yet again. But this time around, Deku has come to possess a number of different quirks thanks to One For All, and with that, we were provided an understanding and example of a quirk we have never seen from him before, Smokescreen, which operates just as the name implies to an egregious extent. Now, after failing to gather any meaningful information or compliance from Muscular, Deku would clarify his dominance to the villain, now defeating him in a single punch. Forget baby Superman, this man is looking like Saitama. With the most recent chapter, we would immediately see the likes of Itajiro and Makabe from Ketsubutsu High, who'd been rushing to the aid of their believed to be endangered classmates. However, they would be stunned by what they saw trailing overhead. It was the prison escapee in the clutches of an unsung hero, the likes of which we would of course know to be Deku. He'd apparently left before any thanks could be given, and so Tatami was a bit bummed. However, albeit subtle, I'd have to consider this a sign of true heroics indeed. As opposed to basking in the glory of his overwhelming victory and capture of Muscular, rather than approaching those endangered and seeking to change their perspective, he simply does his job, keeps his head down, and keeps it pushing. But even still, what tremendous power indeed, as these civilians would no longer have anything to fear for the moment and would from here lend a helping hand when it came to Shindo's recovery. A sign of common decency remaining despite the now depraved state of their surroundings. A willingness to contribute to one's own community and the overall sanctity of its peoples rather than leaving such a job to solely befall the heroes. We are currently in the midst of some major growing pains, but with quick glimpses like this, I am at the very least hopeful for the future of this society. Now, as Shindo faded in and out of consciousness, he would question if his savior was truly Deku, the kid he'd met in the provisional license exam, as funny enough, Deku had saved him in that time as well. However, the difference between the guy who had saved him and the kid from back then was way too major to make any definitive connection between the two. Elsewhere, however, Deku would bring the now incapacitated Muscular to a nearby police precinct and would again hide his identity and visage behind a veil of smoke, then swiftly getting out of there the moment they recognize the likes of Muscular. And with the threat now quelled, his danger sense would settle down, as he would then pull out a cell phone and call the likes of All Might. Then leaping into a darkened alleyway, All Might would be waiting for him with shades and a leather jacket on. And suddenly I felt like I was reading a different superhero story entirely. The tone has certainly shifted, and at that, I'm curious, as fans of the school-oriented aspect of My Hero Academia, what are your thoughts on this? Do you like it? Are you hoping to see more from the UA perspective as well? Let me know. All Might would question if he had sustained any injuries, but Deku was just fine. In fact, he would credit the contribution of All Might for this, as thanks to him, he was now using a power stabilizing support item from overseas, the likes of which we did in fact predict, funny enough. From here, however, All Might would remind him that this was merely a prototype and wasn't exactly suited to sustain his full power, that he should avoid pushing it too far before his final battle against Shigaraki, as Deku would agree without resistance. All Might would then suddenly receive a call as Deku's danger sense would simultaneously go off. It was Hawks, checking in on the current state of Deku while Best Jeanist and Endeavor handled a villain in the background. Here, Hawks looks to have changed his goggles, but even more pressing than that, I don't see any feathers here at all. I highly doubt they would have him fighting and such without at least a few, so we'll assume that he's able to handle himself with at least one for a sword or something. Besides that, his speech bubble is still a bit shaky, and so it's implied that his voice hasn't entirely recovered from his encounter with Dabi. He now has a new scar, which is very on brand because Horikoshi loves to leave scars on his characters, and not just the emotional kind. But yeah, All Might would then confirm that Deku's doing just fine and has now returned, just as Deku would leap off again. Hawks would then speak of All Might being overprotective. Now the translation here was a bit iffy to me, but at the very least, I guess it seems like All Might and Deku have been very much keeping to themselves, and that may be a bit of an issue from the perspective of Hawks, who seeks their compliance. We would then flash back to Deku's time in the hospital as the casts were now removed, and remarkably enough, he was gyrating and moving his limbs without issue. Indeed, he was warned before that to overexert his limbs again would be the end of them. But interestingly enough, this was not the case. And here's the subtle humor of Horikoshi, as the entire staff of this hospital seemed to parody Mario characters, as our boy Deku actually receives the aid of Dr. Mario himself, whose hair is even in the shape of his iconic hat. Wow. But anyways, previously, Deku has been sustaining internal injuries. However, this time, most of the damage was external for once, and thanks to the reinforcement of Black Whip, his limbs seem to have been protected from the inside out. And at the time of his prior diagnosis, after just fighting Muscular for the first time, Deku was at around 5% of his full potential. 20 being when the floodgates of Black Whip opened up around the current point of the anime. But Deku is now at about 45%, a number that is both simultaneously exciting and unsettling. Exciting because he is already able to one-shot Muscular without even trying, and so the overwhelming majority of characters in general should be light work to him in theory. Meanwhile, he still has plenty of room to grow, but I suppose that's a bit twofold because it is a bit unsettling that he is still growing, meanwhile Shigaraki could arise at any point. But despite this change, Deku will of course still need to be mindful of protecting his own limbs. From here, however, we would have the request of Deku's mother to know of her son's quirk. It was time for her to learn the truth. She would learn that this was a power only Deku could bear, one that simultaneously makes him a target for the most nefarious villains in existence. She would question the future of her son as All Might would begin speaking of protecting him at UA, as Deku would interject that he wouldn't be going back to school, and his determination was clear. At the end of the day, Shigaraki could detect him at any moment, that even at this very moment he could attack the hospital, that after the events of the war arc, the last thing Deku wants to see is more people precious to him get hurt because of their proximity to him. Because if Shigaraki fulfills his metamorphosis sooner rather than later, the situation will only become worse, that he needs to stop him and all for one before it is too late. His mother, now clearly shaken, would question how he could possibly do anything in the shape that he's in, as Deku would simply respond that he'll get stronger, which was absolutely badass. She would then make her disapproval known as he would look to her softly and grip her hand tighter. He'd reflect on his younger days playing hero with his mother, which provided us with the most wholesome shot ever. Oh man, I just love this, and boy oh boy, All Might was not kidding back then. Deku's mom really did look like Shimura Nana. He'd then tell his mother that he needed to go, that he needs to save more people, as the tears would just endlessly flow from her eyes as he would reassure her that he will be back. And would you believe the growth of this man? Not a single tear shed. I am impressed. But All Might, now remembering the vow he had made to Deku's mother, would arise, saying that since Deku's already made up his mind, he won't try to stop him and will instead join him for the sake of guidance. Now, since we're talking about Deku's mom here, I feel like we should also talk about his absent father. So Deku's dad is said to be overseas, and a long time ago we were told by Horikoshi that we would in fact have the appearance of his father revealed to us at some point in the story. And so with that in mind, considering the fact that we have now been confirmed to be within the final act of the story, I wonder when he'll be able to arise, because right now there are travel restrictions in place. And his dad was said to have a fire breathing quirk, and so it's not likely that he'll be able to just warp his way over. Nothing too pressing, just figured I'd get my thoughts out on that. Now, the participation of All Might would be conveyed to the top 3 heroes, who would then agree to remain as close to them as possible as to swoop in to save them from harm's way. Now, if you've been with the channel for a while, then you would know that we very much expect the death of All Might to come at some point or another, so with him being placed in harm's way like this, it just seems to be on the right track. Just saying. But hey, no reason to be too afraid, because if even Gran Torino's still kicking, we should be alright. Now, Gran Torino would laugh to himself after hearing of Shimura Nana crying in the afterlife, then saying that he won't be able to join her just yet. But before Deku's departure, he would tell him not to be too set on Shigaraki's redemption, as in some cases, death can be a sort of salvation as well, as he would then pass the symbolic baton over, providing Deku with his cowl. But with this would begin the greatest team up in modern heroics. The top 3 heroes and the likes of All Might and his successor Deku would be the hope for the society, and that was the chapter. Very exciting things to come from My Hero Academia lately, and to an extent, every chapter is now a sort of surprise as to what we will receive next. And so between this, season 5 of the anime, and the upcoming theatrical film, it is an amazing time to be a My Hero Academia fan. And as much as we love covering all this for you guys, lately it has been a serious struggle to do so. Recently, we have been under attack constantly through false copyright strikes. Last year, we had our channel terminated for 4 entire months, and this time around, although we managed to consolidate to a bit over 2 weeks, we still had our channel terminated for a time. And with this, we of course couldn't provide you guys with any content despite not having done anything wrong at all. It's to the point where, despite a lack of fault on our part, we have opted to completely overhaul our editing format to what you see today. And would you believe it, despite our best efforts to simply have fun and share our collective enthusiasm with this community, YouTube themselves decided to take our monetization away from us effective immediately across the entire channel. Now, as much as we love doing what we do, at the end of the day, it is hard work. I mean, I'm not afraid to say that we work harder than just about anyone to bring to you all our very best on an almost daily basis. Something that we couldn't possibly justify without monetary support. And because of this whole situation, we have had to shelve a video we were working on for that day. Now, this was clearly a mistake on YouTube's part, but one we couldn't have any chance to appeal until an entire month later, which is absolutely ridiculous. And so we took to Twitter and rallied the troops. And man, you guys really pulled through for us. Genuinely, there was no way we could have possibly done so without your incredible support, so thank you. And thank you to all the content creators who use their platforms to further our voice and help us resolve this issue. We really appreciate it. They are trying to suppress and stop us for whatever reason, but again and again, our name, Plot Armor, continues to ring true, and we refuse to be defeated. So to all my Plot Army soldiers, take pride in this victory. But know that the war has only just begun, because no matter how hard they try to keep us down, we will continue to rise up further and further until we are definitively the greatest we can possibly be. And so to make sure we are locked and loaded for whatever crazy schemes they try to pull going forwards, make sure that you're not only subscribed to the channel with notifications on, but also following us over on Twitter and Instagram at PlotArmorYT. Because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, or any anime and manga content for that matter, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I am Sliceable Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching, and have an awesome day. I love you.